It's 5 past. We'll start our program and people will join as we go. So welcome everyone. Some of you may have joined the Siyum last week for everybody, but we felt that as women, there should be a special Siyum just for us where we get to hear from the women who are learning and are teaching. So we're going to start our program with Mrs. Devorah Smith from Miami, Florida. And we want to start with the perspective of somebody who is learning herself and with her family. And so without further ado, I'll call on Mrs. Devorah Smith to share with us how it works with her family.
Hi, everybody. So good to see so many faces here. And I'm so happy that there's so many cameras on because it's much nicer to speak to faces than to just blank black spots. Anyways, okay, so it's a very famous story of Reb Mendel Futterfass when he was in prison. There's many stories, but the one I'm going to share with you today is that Reb Mendel Futterfass, when he was in prison, the guard came in one day and he was so bewildered. He said, I just don't understand how you're so strong and you're so happy while you are in prison. All your friends, all the goyim there, they are so sad. A lot of them die in their sleep. They can't handle this. What's the trick? What's going on? So Reb Mendel Futterfass said, well, what was their life before they came to prison? Their life was vodka. They're in prison. They have no vodka. So of course, they're not happy. They have nothing to live for if that's their whole life. But me, before I came to prison, what was my life? My life was at sunset, I daven mincha. And now in prison, the same thing. At sunset, I daven mincha. So Reb Mendel was explaining that his reality was serving Hashem, being connected to the Rebbe, and Kedusha and Elikus. And therefore, wherever he was, it didn't really matter. So what I would like to discuss is, how do I make my reality, how do we make our reality, Yiddishkeit, Chassidishkeit, and Hashem? How do we do that? And I firmly believe that we really do this through learning the Rebbe Sichos. When we learn the Rebbe Sichos, this is really how we make Chassidishkeit, Hashem, Yiddishkeit, our reality. Because it explains in a Yom Yom that our mind is always active. Our mind is constantly working. And whatever it's filled with, that's the lens that you see life through. That's how you interpret all the occurrences that are happening around you. So when we read Sichos, that's the mindset that we have. For example, if somebody is planning a chasana, when they're planning the wedding, suddenly they're noticing everybody's rings and gowns and flowers, and they start seeing the world through this lens. If your child is starting preschool, you're also noticing and seeing the world through those lenses. You're buying a new car, you're noticing all the cars. So when we read the Rebbe Sichos, we're now viewing the whole world through the Rebbe Sichos. And what's very extremely incredible about the Rebbe Sichos, more than any Torah, is that it really goes through Kol HaTorah Kula. It goes through the whole Torah. And the Rebbe put a big emphasis by Rambam, the idea that we would go through the whole Torah. And why am I saying the Sichos go through the whole Torah? Because the Sichos, the Rebbe talks about the Parsha, the Rebbe discusses Pshat, the Rebbe discusses Remez, the Rebbe discusses Drash, Soid, this. You learn halacha with the Rebbe's insights. You learn Rashi, and you have a completely different understanding of Rashi. You can never just learn Rashi the same way, which we've done a lot in the last few months. And Rashi in a completely different way. So your view, when you're looking at a Rashi, even if you're not going to delve into it the way we do in a Sikha, is still completely different. And so you finish the Sikha, there's a lesson. You go to the store the next day and you're shopping and it's a different view. It's a different way that you're reaching out to another Yid after you learn the Sikha. And it really affects our mindset, and actually it also affects our actions. And we just had the Seres HaDibros, and the first word is Anoichi, Hashem's essence, and it stands for Ana Nafshis Kesavis Yahavis, which means that Hashem is found in the Torah, and Hashem is found in Torah. So through learning Chassidus, we're connecting to Hashem, and the Rebbe is found in the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's Sichos. So we're connecting to Hashem, and furthermore, we are connecting to Chassidim, because all of us are learning the same Sichos. And I always had this like sort of jealousy of, when the Sichos came out, I was too young. When the Rebbe would come from a Sicha, the Rebbe would say a Sicha, everyone would get together and discuss it, and what does it mean? And there was such a chayis in the Sicha. What is the Rebbe talking about, and how do we apply this? And I feel like we now have that chayis, that we're all learning the same thing, and we're able to have this simcha in our learning, in addition to the fact that it's machayev us. You want to learn, go through the whole project Likkutei Sichos. At least they handed it now on a silver platter. Which Sichos do I learn every week? In addition to that, it's machayev you. If I know I have to finish, they're making the Siyum, even if it means cramming in the 3 Sichos that I missed, I got to get it done by today, because today is the Siyum. So it obligates us and it keeps us, together. And there's WhatsApp groups where people are discussing, and the Rebbe emphasized many times learning berabim, learning in groups and learning the same thing, and that joins us together. And specifically, what Leah said in the beginning, that my children, as soon as they saw it, they were so excited and they wanted to join. And even my 9-year-old son, he goes online and he follows the flowcharts and the sichas. And I have a high school girl, all different ages, teenagers, younger kids, my husband, and I. And it really creates such an energy of chayis and discussion in the family. At the Shabbos table, who wants to summarize the Sikha? What do you want to add to it? What questions do you have on it? So it really brings such a simcha and chayis to our learning. So that has been, created in my family, this really beautiful atmosphere and chayis in learning the Rebbe's Sichos. Additionally, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan for Pesach, my father was put on a ventilator, and because of Corona, as many other people, unfortunately. And as siblings, all together, we kept on brainstorming, what should we do? And, so many different things we did, which I won't, bring in now, it's not so applicable. But we really, really wanted to express and to live with Trachrit V'Zayngut. So we did 2 things. It was about a week and a half. My father was on the ventilator. It was pretty much staying the same. And we said, no, the Rebbe taught us bitachon. So one of the things we did is we gave $2,000 to the Chabad house for the Suda Sadah, that we had full bitachon is going to happen. Additionally, we wanted to do something ruchnius, and something again that really expressed our bitachon. We're certain. So we decided that we were going to make a family shir once a week. And of course, when we thought, what should the family shir be? In seconds, we knew Project Likkutei Sichos. And Baruch Hashem, my father was very into Project Likkutei Sichos. We had a simcha shortly before where we came from out of town. My father spoke about it, my father encouraged it, and he was very passionate about the project. So we decided if we're learning a Sicha every week, of course, what's it going to be? It's going to be Project Likkutei Sichos. And Baruch Hashem, Erev Pesach, a few hours before Pesach, my father was taken off the ventilator. Reish Chodesh Iyar, he was brought home. And about a week later, the next week, we started our weekly shir on Wednesdays, where we have siblings, 12 siblings with my parents from all over the world, learning one of the sichos of Project Likkutei Sichos. So Project Likkutei Sichos is really uniting and adding simcha and bringing achtos within my personal family in Miami, and also with my siblings from around the world. I'm just going to end off with one last thing, and that is that it was always a dream of mine to go through the whole Project Likkutei Sichos. But it just seemed like, how would I, it was like, okay, maybe when I retire, later on, when I have more time in my life. But I'm extremely thankful that they have made it so doable. And I'm so excited that I reached the first milestone in completing Chelek Yud Beis, and Emertz Hashem, Be'ezus Hashem, the next Siyum will be with our Rebbe, with Mashiach Tzidkenu in Yerushalayim.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Mrs. Devorah Smith. For all those who just joined us in the last few minutes, welcome again. And we just heard from Mrs. Smith, who shared with us how Project Likkutei Sichos is done as a family unit within her immediate family and extended family. Now we are going to hear from Mrs. Chana Saradana from Leeds, England, and she is personally very passionate about Sichos, and she's going to share with us a little bit why this is something that is so important to her and why she was involved in creating the Women's WhatsApp group.
Thank you, Leah. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu u'nayim garaleinu u'mayafa yerushasenu. Dear sisters, how fortunate we are to have a Rebbe who gifted the world with thousands of hours of farbrengens and sichos, which the Rebbe then personally took his precious time to edit and share with us, giving us the possibility to be makusha, to connect to the Rebbe in the closest of ways. As the Rebbe said himself about the teachings of the Rabbeim before him, that their essence is found in the very Torah that they taught. And just like the food that we taste on Friday afternoon, the Rebbe enabled us to have a taste of the Geula and the Torah Chadasha, which Mashiach will teach us, as well as giving us the knowledge and the tools of how to bring the Geula. Umanayim, how pleasant it is to be the women of this generation, the women that the Rebbe encouraged to learn Torah, the women to whom the Rebbe addressed all his sichos equally, and at times specifically to women who the Rebbe called the Nashim Tzidkaniyos, the righteous women in whose chos Mashiach will come, and who empowered us to fill that role and fulfill that purpose. And Uma Yafa, how beautiful it is to be a part of this incredible project that unites us together week after week, sicha after sicha, going through the entire Likkutei Sichos. In an unprecedented way and in an incredibly short time, the website is full of numerous sources, making it available to each and every person, no matter their background, knowledge, or even the amount of time they have to dedicate to it. And we owe a huge thanks and much gratitude to all those who run this incredible project, the sponsors and the teachers who must be a huge amount of time each week to make this happen. I'm very humbled to address you all here today. And in no way, by me holding this virtual mic, do I profess to be the biggest maven in Likkutei Sichos. And in fact, when I first heard about the project, I absolutely loved the idea, but didn't think that it applied to me. Then hearing more about it, I wanted to participate, but I thought I shouldn't actually sign up to it. Because first of all, I reasoned that with my very busy life, I wasn't sure to actually always be able to learn the sichos weekly. And secondly, how could I truthfully say after learning a sicha that I had really learned and digested it. But then I thought about it and I realized that if I make the commitment to it, I'm much more likely to find the time, and I'll just do my best to learn whatever I can. So I decided to commit to the 10-minute reviews with the goal to learn at least one of the Sichos more in depth. And Baruch Hashem, thanks to the fantastic classes and material available on Project Likkutei Sichos, I have been able to participate on some level, even on very busy weeks. And I think most mothers of young children here can say that since lockdown, every week has been a busy week. And even with the more complicated Sichos that I would have never been able to learn on my own. And sometimes I have to catch up a few, like Devorah was saying. Baruch Hashem, I have the schus to be a shlucha on campus. And on the very day of Yud Shvat, I happened to be learning with one of my students, and I mentioned to her about this initiative in honor of 70 years of the Rebbe's leadership. I was completely humbled when, with much less hesitation than I had, she leapt on the bandwagon, signed up to the project pretty much on the spot, and has been keeping up with it ever since. And my own learning was also further enhanced by it because we turned our weekly learning into a chabrosa on one of the sichos. And this continues to be an incredible joy as we work together on understanding the sicha and applying it to our lives. Jody, if you're listening to this, thank you. So we're coming from Shavuos, Zman Matan Torah Seinu, and the Rebbe, in a mimer that was printed in last week's Ram Malchus, that was said on Shavuos Tavshin Chav Tes, in a mimer, he brings down a mimer from the Rebbe Marash, who quotes a Yalkut Shemaini that says that when the Eibishter said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem, your God, your in a singular form, every Jew felt, Imi Hadibur Medaber. These words are speaking to me personally. And the Midrash further explains that the feeling of it being personal to them was not only on a neshama level, on a ruchniistic level, but each one for their particular stage and situation in life physically. And that is exactly how we feel as we learn the Rebbe Sichos, that the Rebbe is addressing each of us personally in our own particular stage and unique situation in life. Imi hadibur medaber. These words speak to and apply to me. In a Sicha on Shabbos Parshas Balak, Tavshin Chaf Daled, the Rebbe tells a beautiful story that a Yid had once told him. This Yid once went into Yichidus with the Frierdiker Rebbe just a couple of days after Shavuos to ask for some advice on something. The Frierdiker Rebbe told him, Ich bin noch auf dem Berg. I am still on Har Sinai. And the Rebbe explained that for the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Giluyim, the revelations of Matan Torah, were still shining even a few days later. When we learn the Rebbe Sichos, our Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe, lifts us up to Har Sinai and shares with us all the levels of the Torah. The Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Side from the basic text to the Rashis, the Mefarshim, and most importantly, the Seides, the secrets of Torah, the Chassidus, and shows us how to apply what we have learned. And when we close that Sefer, we are on some level still up on Har Sinai with the Rebbe. Our lives are permeated with what we've learned. The atmosphere in our homes and our connection with our family, friends, and all the people we come in contact with are affected. And the decisions and choices, as Leah said, we make will be permeated by the Rebbe's viewpoint and the ultimate goal of every word the Rebbe said, which is to make a dira b'tachtonim, to make this world into a dwelling place for Hashem and bring Mashiach. In Tafshin Nun, I'm sorry I told this story by the Shluchim office, but I'm going to repeat it again because I think there's some new faces here, but it was Chapei Shvat. In Tafshin Nun, my husband was a 19-year-old bacher studying in yeshiva in New York. Now, the Rebbe, for various special days, would edit mamarim that had been said some years earlier, and a maimah would be printed in little booklets for everyone to learn. Of course, it was a cause for great rejoicing in Lubavitch each time this would happen, and everyone would learn the newest edited maimah with great joy. My husband, on receiving the maimah, would learn it a few times until he knew it bal peh. The next morning, he would hand a note to the Rebbe's secretary to give to the Rebbe, to let the Rebbe know that he had done this, and he wrote in the note that he hoped sheyigrem nachas ruach lachak ad mushlita, that this would cause nachas to the Rebbe. Of course, my husband did not expect any answer from the Rebbe to his note. He was just sharing his personal good news with the Rebbe. Now, this happened several times And one time he was in the Rebbe's secretary's office shortly after for something else, when to his enormous surprise, he was told, you have an answer from the Rebbe on the note that you gave in. The secretary showed my husband the note. The Rebbe had added the word, Garam, meaning you have caused nachas. On a second occasion, the same thing happened, and this time the Rebbe added also the word rav, a lot, into the sentence. You have caused great nachas. There is a big domino effect that only starts with us learning the Sikha. We add purpose and meaning to our lives, which will affect our home and all the people we come in contact with. And as the Rebbe brings down in Hayom Yom through learning the Sichos HaMamarim, we become more makusha and connected to the Rebbe. For me, Chumash Chitas has become a new experience, getting a taste of how the Rebbe learned Chumash and Rashi. And as mothers, our children learn a huge amount from how we spend our time. When we make an effort to carve out some precious time from our extremely busy schedules, and that's seemingly impossible before you actually do it, I must note, and we learn the Rebbe's Torah, this gives our children a stronger message than any words we will ever tell them. And if you do this, even if you do this when your children are not around, they don't see you, maybe they're sleeping, although in Corona, if our children ever don't see us, but they will know, as children do, that this is important to you. And everything I've said they're all great and important reasons to invest yourself in this. But to me, the thought that gives me the most strength to do this is, as the Rebbe stated clearly to so many, learning the Rebbe's Torah gives nachas, ruach, rav, great nachas to the Rebbe. And may all this Torah learning bring the Geula already and Tchias HaMeisim mamish now. And may we be zeicha to hear the Torah Chadasha from our Rebbe in the Beis HaMikdash today, and we'll be able to say, aha, that's what it really means.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Donna, for sharing your passion. It's so important for us to just keep motivating ourselves, because it did get tough in the last few months. You know, we all started with the best intentions and things changed. We're now going to move on to do our actual Siyum. And we are going to call on one of the teachers, Mrs. Malkie Janowski. And I think it's just been such an inspiration to me personally, and I'm sure to many of you who listen to the Women's Shiurim, to see that the Rebbe was pile that we have women who are scholars, Baruch Hashem, in our communities. And some of the Sichos, when I learn them and I hear Mrs. Janowski teaching them, and I you know, the Gemaras and the deep Hasidus concepts that she explains so clearly, I'm amazed and I'm proud. I feel collectively proud as Hasidim that we have women like this amongst us. So thank you for sharing your teachings with all of us. And now Mrs. Janowski is going to do a Siyum on this, the Bahar Bays, the second Sikha of Bahar. Mrs. Janowski.
I thought that this would be a great idea, but not necessarily so feasible. But having actually gotten into it, it's been a wonderful experience. I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say that. So Mazel Tov on our accomplishment, and to many, many more Chalakim to come. So one of the closing Sichos of this Chelek is Bahar Beis, the second Sicha on Parshas Bahar. And there are 2 points that I want to share that to me really speak to the lens that Hasidus gives us to see the world, and particularly the Rebbe's view of the world. And for me, the huge greatness of the Sichos is, as I think Leah mentioned earlier, that you get to see the Rebbe's perspective. And the more you immerse yourself in it, the more we really can take on that perspective as our own and just appreciate the incredible viewpoint that we are privileged as Hasidim to have by learning Hasidus. So in the Sicha on Parshas Bahar, the Rebbe asks a pretty fundamental question, which I think most people would not even ask, because, you know, it could almost be controversial, which is that it is usher to, you're not allowed to give a loan to a Jew and charge interest. However, it is a mitzvah that if you give a loan to a non-Jew, you should charge interest, which seems kind of politically incorrect, that you would be mandated basically to charge interest, which is kind of a hardship for the person who has to pay it. And the Rebbe says, why? We can understand why you'd be allowed to charge interest to a non-Jew, but why should you? Why is it a mitzvah? And secondly, the Rebbe also he quotes a fascinating halacha, which is that if a Jew does give a loan to another Jew and he charges interest, which he was not allowed to do, so he does something wrong, the other Jew pays the interest. And then that first Jew, the lender, realizes, I really shouldn't have done that. I'm going to give back that money because I shouldn't have taken it. It was wrong for me to do it. It is preferable for the borrower who paid the interest not to accept it back from the lender. The lender should keep that interest, even though he wasn't allowed to take it in the first place. So let's look into these two ideas. Why is it that we're meant to charge interest to a non-Jew? Very briefly, the answer is because within the interest itself, within that money, there are sparks of kedusha that are connected to the neshama of the lender. The fact that the lender can charge that interest means that Hashem has set it up so that there is kedusha that is waiting for you as the lender to elevate from that interest. And when that money is in the possession of the non-Jew, it's not going to be elevated. It can only be elevated by you. So what is the perspective here? That number one, something that we see very often in Hasidus, that anything in Gashmis that you're coming across is because you can elevate it. There's something that's waiting for you to come along and do. But even more than that, on a slightly deeper level, is that Hashem has orchestrated this whole situation, that this non-Jew needed money, and that you are so positioned where you can be the one to lend it to him. And that means you have the ability to acquire that interest, and you can cause this elevation in that money, which would not have happened otherwise. It can only happen through you because those sparks are connected to your neshama. And that is a viewpoint that Hasidus shares all over. And again, something I think that the Rebbe is, if we look at like the focal points of what the Rebbe taught us, it's that where you are in this situation and the opportunity that you have is uniquely tailored for you, and there is something you are meant to do here. And that is an incredibly empowering perspective, especially in situations like these where we feel so powerless. And so everything is so out of control around us. And what this is telling us is Hashem is orchestrating these events. And something that you might think is so not consequential, that somebody needed a loan and you're the one who's able to give it to him. Why should that be, a cog in the grand master plan of things? It is. And that interest money has been waiting for you. And it's you and your neshama that has the ability to elevate it. So it just speaks to the power that Hasidus gives us, that lets us know that we have, that everything is set up in a way that we are positioned to do exactly whatever it is that we need to do. And the second point of this interesting halacha, that if somebody does teshuvah after charging interest and they want to return that money, it is preferable for you not to accept it back. Why is that? Because again, like we said, in the interest money, there is some kind of connection, an intrinsic connection that money has to the neshama of the lender. Now, in the case of a Jew loaning money to a Jew, the lender should never really acquire that interest money. His way of relating to that money should be to just stay away from it, which is how we relate in general to anything that is usher to us, anything that we're not allowed to use. What is our way of being mavar that, of elevating that? It is to not touch it, to say that's not for me, and to keep our distance. But if somebody makes a mistake and they do take that interest money and then it becomes theirs, all of a sudden, instead of looking at them and saying, wow, what a mess up, you really blew it, what does Hasidus do? And again, how does the Rebbe relate to us and to our very human faults and issues? Is that you have a new opportunity, an opportunity that you would never have gotten otherwise. This is an incredible chance, and don't waste it. So if you're the borrower in this situation, don't take that money back, because the lender now he shouldn't have gotten to this space, but he did. And now that he got to this space, he has the ability to elevate that money in a direct way, in a way that he couldn't have gotten to in a straightforward, direct way. So let him have that opportunity, which again is an incredible perspective that Chassidus has, an incredible perspective in particular that the Rebbe always shared, that you might think you've done something wrong, and maybe you have done something wrong. And you might think that the choices you made were not the best, and they weren't the best in the moment. But now that they happened already, you can't look at your situation as b'diavad. You can't say like, I blew it already, so I just, it's not worth it, and I can't get anything out of here, and I've really ruined things. We never ruin things. There's always some way where, even though it wasn't our plan and it wasn't even necessarily what Hashem wanted from the get-go, now that it has happened, there is a way where Hashem is giving us the chance to make it even better. And that is an incredible viewpoint as well, that the Rebbe never looks at anyone as you're too far gone. And not only are you not too far gone, where we can say, okay, if you work hard, you can come back, you can turn yourself around. The Rebbe looked at it as that place where you are is giving you the strength to go somewhere even greater. And that is something that Chassidus always speaks about. The power of teshuvah is that not just that you can leave it behind you, but it can propel you forward. You have a strength that comes from what was a mistake that you would not have gotten otherwise. So in whatever situation we are, even if it is a situation that we don't think we should have been in, even if it was because of a choice that was not the best choice to make, that we should never fall into any kind of sadness about that, because even though we shouldn't have been here, Hashem is still orchestrating things and it's still setting things up. And we have a gift in this situation of whatever the opportunity is, an opportunity that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise, that we can turn this into a moment of Kedusha and a moment of moving forward, where the strength for that moving forward comes specifically because of the, so to speak, setback that we had. So those are the, I think the punch that I got, the major thrust of the ideas from the Sicha on Parshas Bahar. And again, these are themes that Chassidus shares with us again and again and again. And as we learn these Sichos week by week by week, we can really get the opportunity to, as much as we can, try out this mindset and try to think in this direction and adopt it as our own. And again, mazel tov to everyone.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your lessons, when you give them, and we appreciate your time and your insight into this. Yeah, this very, like the Rebbe's cook, the Rebbe's outlook on life that we absorb from the Sicha. To conclude the Siyum on Parshas Likkutei, we will now call on Mrs. Rivky Kaplan. And again, like Mrs. Janowski, we get to hear from Mrs. Janowski every week. And I'll say the same thing. I'm just amazed at the level of Torah knowledge that you have and that you share with all of us. So thank you. And I know from the back end, when we look at the women's shiurim, Baruch Hashem, there are hundreds. I think it's about 700 women, 700 clicks on the women's shiurim. So I think that says a lot about women learning and women learning from other women. I know there was some technical difficulty, but let's see if we can get Mrs. Janowski on to teach us about the Likkutei.
Leah, I'm here, albeit on audio, not on video.
Okay.
Tell me if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. It's an honor and it's a privilege to be with everyone who's on today in celebrating the Siyum, the completion of Chelek days of Likkutei Sichos. Like many of you, learning the Rebbe's Sichos on a weekly basis is a very new addition to my learning schedule. The focus in learning was previously on the Torah of the Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Rashab, but how wonderful to have established this new feeling of iskashrus with the Rebbe through the weekly Sichos, with this fantastic goal of finishing Likkutei Sichos in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi already, but finishing it in completion in 8 years. What strikes me weekly over and over is how the Rebbe develops the lumdus of the Sikha, the scholarly aspect of the Sikha, and always connects the lumdus to an Indian in Avodah, to an Indian of service, crystallizing for us is Chassidim how to be learned in the Rebbe's broad way of thinking and how to serve God apropos to our time and our generation. It's a privilege to have this opportunity to conclude the Sefer Chelek Yud Beis, concluding Sefer Vayikra in Likkutei Sichos, and we will conclude it looking at the very end of the Likkutei Beis Sicha, the second Sicha in Parshas the Likkutei, which concludes the Parshias. In this last Sicha of Chelek Yud Beis, the Rebbe brings a fascinating discussion about the Dinei Meiser Behema, the laws of tithing of animals, and the question regarding the possibility of a Baal Mum, a blemished animal, being the 10th in the count as the animals pass through under a rod, determining in that random way which animal becomes the animal that will be the Meiser Behema. And if indeed the Meiser Behema is a Baal Mum, says Rashi, Yochal b'Teiras Meiser v'Aser Ligzay v'Liavei. The animal will be eaten, not brought up as a sacrifice, because we can't bring an animal that's a Baal Mum as a sacrifice. A blemished animal cannot be brought up on the altar, but it can be eaten. So we will eat the animal, considering it as a Meiser Behema, as an animal sacrifice, as an animal Meiser, and you may not shear its wool, nor use it for labor. The Rebbe brings the discussion full circle, expanding on the many questions and answers, and there's almost a Sikha worth of Marmakimus in this Sikha. The Rebbe brings it round to the Yena Shal Torah, the enlightened consciousness that emerges through the Rashi, and that is the divine purpose in one's divine service, to create for God a Zira B'Tachtonim, a dwelling in the very lowest of all worlds, where godliness impacts the most mundane of our activities. How does one do this? Surely, says the Rebbe, bringing a source from the Alter Rebbe, accessing godliness happens through the Aseh Tov of one's Avodah. In one's service, there is the Aseh Tov, the doing of the good, and the Sur Meirah, the refraining, the holding back from doing bad. So, through the Aseh Tov of one's Avodah, through a mitzvah Aseh, one facilitates bringing godliness down into this mundane reality. And yet, that which facilitates the Aseh Tov, the end goal, is in fact by being meticulous in a Sur Meirah, turning away or rejecting the negative or not doing the wrong thing. And the muscle that Rebbe brings to illustrate this is that in preparing a beautiful palace for the king, all the rubbish and debris must first be cleaned out and carted away. We'll conclude this Siyum looking inside the Sikha and reading from the last few lines of the Sikha. The Rebbe says as follows: V'hine af shesur meirah, though the sur meirah, the refraining, the withholding, the turning away from the bad, like Isur Giza, the fact that one cannot shear the wool of the sheep, etc., hurak hakdama v'hachana v'hamshachas hakdusha begilui, it's only a preparation for bringing down the divine light, divine godliness in a revealed way. Al Yedei, how does one do that? Through the Ve'asei Tov, through the doing what one is supposed to do, through the mitzvahs aseh, which in our discussion is the Yechal B'Teiras Meiser, eating of the meat of the behemoth that was a Baal Mum, and considering it as a Meiser behemoth. Mikol Mokai, nevertheless, says the Rebbe, Tzarech Liyos Hazehirus, there must be great care in the Sur Meirah, that's the B'chol HaPratim, particularly in the details of the Sur Meirah. Rashi, and Rashi explains this as Shezeh Beis Ha'inyonim. This meticulousness is found in these two things. One, not shearing the wool of the animal, and secondly, in not using the animal for service, for labor. Isur Giza, the Isur Avoda, has the heros being careful, being meticulous. Tzarech liyos hein ba'avoda hana'asis beguf ha'behema. One must be meticulous in being careful in the Sur Meirah with the body of the animal. In other words, with using the animal. Dahainu b'inyonim ikriyim, in essential things. The hein begiza shehi b'sayris. And as well, one must be careful in the shearing, which just impacts the hair. Shahasayris heines b'sari hatofal b'sari. The cyrus, the hair of the animal, is found on the body of the animal, but it's one step removed. The Hainu, in other words, says the Rebbe, has a hero's gam the inyonim shenirim l'chora kitzeilim. One has to be meticulous and careful in things that look toughful. They look almost unnecessary or secondary. The Rebbe is in fact teaching us a very, very important lesson. We understand the Aseh Tov because the Aseh Tov is clearly delineated for us as a mitzvah aseh. But when it comes to the Sur Meirah, when it comes to the refraining, sometimes the heart is not in it. The heart may be in the Aseh Tov, but is the heart, the passion, the meticulousness, does that exist in the Sur Meirah the same way? And the Rebbe says this is what Rashi comes to teach us. Be meticulous in the Sur Meirah. Be meticulous in what you know is an absolute wrong, and be meticulous in what you think is maybe new. Is it really? Be meticulous in the Sur Meirah, even if it looks like a tuffle, even if it looks like something so insignificant. And the Rebbe concludes, and with this we conclude our Siyum on Sefer Vayikra V'ayedei Avoda B'Seder Zeh. And through this type of service, being meticulous with the Sur Meirah as with the Aseh Tov. Tia achar kach kedeboi. After that will follow ha'hamshacha sha'ayedei v'aseh tov, drawing down the divine through the Aseh Tov, whose ultimate goal and purpose is la'aseh Shlo Yisbarach Dira. Our ultimate goal and purpose is to make for the Eibishter a dwelling place, b'tachtonim, in the lowest of all places, in the lowest of all our activities, in the lowest of all that we do. Again, it has been a privilege to learn with those of you who participate in the Women's Shiurim. It will continue to be a privilege, Emet Hashem, and we may we be zecha with this chus to greet Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen. Thank you so much. Like I said, I feel like there's an extra thanks for every week teaching us. And even though there are multiple shiurim, I know personally, I really enjoy learning from a woman, and it's been such a pleasure to learn with you. And our last speaker now, I'm going to call on Mrs. Rivky Kaplan from Tzfat, Israel. I'm not sure what time it is there, but definitely a lot later than here. And Mrs. Kaplan is one of the Magidei Shiurim, one of the people who have been teaching the Sichos. And I really think, like I said, it's been nice learning with you. I think Mrs. Kaplan really makes it feel like we're learning with her when she teaches the classes. So thank you for that. And we're going to hear some words about why the importance of Torah study specifically for women. Mrs. Kaplan?
Hi, Leah. Thank you. My sister registered a complaint that I ask a question, but I don't give her a chance to answer, and I already answered it. So I have to tell you a thought that just came to me as I'm watching screen after screen of women joining this really monumental occasion. And it just came to me that could it be that this is the first time in history that there wasn't a single time throughout the entire Chumash Vayikra that the Aron Kodesh was opened in a Bet Knesset to take out the Torah. And yet, at the same time, could there have been a time in history where we brought home Chumash Vayikra to the epicenter of who we are? Has there ever been a time where so many women lived with Chumash Vayikra? And for the first time, I think the world has paused and began to appreciate what and who the Ikeret HaBayit is, you know, something that was first and foremost in everything that the Rebbe did. And I'm just like watching this and I'm thinking like, it's unbelievable, almost as if the Eibishter gave us the trufa, you know, before he gave us the makkah of this like kind of unbelievable situation that who would have ever thought they would go through an entire Chumash and yet not have opened a Sefer Torah in a Bet Knesset? And simultaneous to that, look what's going on with Chumash Vayikra. So it's just giving me goosebumps when I just think about it and I see how many people have invested in what's often a Chumash that might be read or learned, but usually a little bit more briefly because there are, you know, like Mrs. Janowski so beautifully put, there's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of seemingly small details that we sometimes have a tendency to overlook. So it's just unbelievable to be a part of this. And I have to say, I have like an embarrassing confession. So I don't know how caught up in the rest of the world, but here in Eretz Yisrael, definitely a couple of months back, like a lot of people were very, very caught up in the Siyum Hashas, right? It was a culmination of 13 years of learning. And like wherever you turned, somebody seemed to be talking about it. And here in Eretz Yisrael, in particular, the emphasis, or at least the things, you know, like our first speaker spoke about, Mrs. Smith, you mentioned like when you're learning something, when you're cooking in something, you happen to see it everywhere, right? So it seemed to me that everywhere I turned, they were talking about the first women's Siyum Hashas, you know, by women, for women. And I was blown away by the depth of dedication and how incredible that must feel. And I was like, you know, my daughter accused me of I was getting obsessed. And I even tried, and I'm just a very practical, organized person. And I just love the idea of starting something and taking ownership page by page, month by month. And at the end, like finishing it in an organized fashion. And there was just something like really mind blowing about it. And I even tried getting tickets to it. And some of my friends were part of the Siyum. And I just was like too caught up in it. And whatever, they were booked out and I stayed home. And it was mamish like that exact time, or maybe a few days later, that I got an email from Leah Wilhelm, who deserves a tremendous Yasher Kayach, because I do think that
Not
you said,
me.
oh, but I do think that you planted the seed, no, for sure, you know, but I think you planted the seed of the need, you know, for women, by women. Yes. And that email that I got from you was the first time that I had heard about Project Likkutei Sichos. And it could be that the idea had just been created 24 hours before that, you know. It was something that was on a very, very fast moving train. And the idea, I felt like the Eibishter sent me exactly what I needed, you know. And I just like, and then my husband went on to explain to me how there's people, and I think Mrs. Smith, you touched on this as well, this idea that Likkutei Sichos is the Rebbe's shas in a sense, that because encapsulated in the volumes of Likkutei Sichos is every kind of perspective of the Torah, of Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebal Peh, all layers of Pardes, all elements of Chassidus, right? And the idea of being able to be a part of something like that, where not only would we have the opportunity to really like take ownership, sicha by sicha, but more hopefully, sicha by sicha, it would take ownership of us, you know? And the words would resonate deeper and deeper. And the influence of those words would begin to really accompany us into all the decisions and all the perspectives that we would be making. So I was an easy customer, I have to say. And like I said, probably, you know, the Siyum Shas gets credit for that, much to my embarrassment. But it was right around Yud Shvat, as we all know, that's when they launched it. And I was speaking to a group of women on Yud Shvat, and I shared my enthusiasm. And Baruch Hashem, many of them were caught up in the enthusiasm. And I'll never forget, I saved this voice note, because Bezrat Hashem, we're going to play it at the final Siyum, of a woman that was at the Farbringen of Yud Shvat. And she said, Rivky, I'm sold. And by the Siyum, I'm going to be 84 years old. So I thought, wow, you know, if she's going to do it, what excuses do the rest of us have? So yeah, okay. But coming on the heels, of course, of Matan Torah, right? And of course, many of us are very familiar with the idea how in preparation for the giving of the Torah, the Eibishter, right after Bnei Yisrael arrived at Midbar Sinai, where we experienced Ki Ish Echad B'Lev Echad, the Eibishter calls Moshe Rabbeinu up to the top of the mountain, and he tells him, "V'Torah leBeis Yaakov, v'Tagid leBnei Yisrael," right? And there's so much that's been written on it. And I just, in the short few minutes that I have, I just want to zoom in on one particular detail. And we know that one of the reasons why the Eibishter particularly wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to first address the women was because, in essence, the women represented all that the Eibishter wanted in giving the Torah. So when the Eibishter set out to create the world, why? Because the Eibishter craved a relationship. What was the notion of a Dira B'Tachtonim? The Eibishter wanted to be in a relationship with somebody. And the feminine soul innately and intuitively understands what that means to be in a relationship on every level. So the Eibishter approaches the women first because the women, by the nature of what their neshama was, would understand what the goal is in the Eibishter giving the Torah, right? And one of the instructions that the Eibishter gives Moshe Rabbeinu at that point is he tells Moshe Rabbeinu, command the women, command the men, that for 3 days prior to Matan Torah, they should refrain from intimacy. Why? So Rashi explains, because for 3 days post-intimacy, a woman can come into contact with a particular form of impurity, and thereby invalidating her, because what would happen if she would wake up the morning of Har Sinai, and she would encounter this impurity, it would invalidate her from actually physically being present at Har Sinai. So the Eibishter orchestrates the halachas prior to Matan Torah so as to ensure that every single Jewish woman is physically present at Matan Torah. And by learning the Rebbe's Chassidus and learning the Rebbe's Sichos and really beginning to see our relationship with the Torah through the Rebbe's perspective, we begin to appreciate just how huge that is, how critical it was to the Eibishter that we be there in a physical sense, that we have a first-hand experience, that we have an eyewitness engagement when the Eibishter comes down from Har Sinai. It's not good enough that we hear about it later from our husbands. It's not good enough that we read it in an article, we listen to it in a podcast. He wants us there because we understand what it really means to be in a relationship with an Eibishter and what it means to be in a relationship with the Eibishter's Torah, right? And so, like Mrs. Donna touched on, the idea of like Ashreinu, that we have a Rebbe that really gave this over to us on a silver platter. So I just want to touch on one particular Nakuda and really a challenge, if I will, of asking ourselves the question of how present and how engaged am I in this relationship, right? And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to everybody, and there shouldn't be, But what I really want to challenge all of us, because a Siyum is not just about patting ourselves on the back, but a Siyum is about, okay, was weiter? Like, what's going to be different in the following Chelek that we didn't accomplish in the last Chelek v'chetzi that we did, right? So I just really want to challenge us, and for everybody, it's going to look different, to however it is that we're learning. And of course, it doesn't have to be every week, and it doesn't have to be every Sicha, but be a little bit more present. What does that mean? Engage in the relationship. For some people, it might mean to actually open the Sicha and follow inside and look at the text. For some people, it might be graduating from the 10-minute to a little bit more. And I know, Mrs. Donovan, you said you did that and you're already reaping the benefits of what that means, right? And chas v'shalom, not to beat yourself up if you didn't get to it, and not to say, oh, there's so much more. No. Like the Rebbe used to say, you did, now what are we going to do more after that? So I really want to encourage us from that place. And I just want to share on a personal level how some of I Baruch Hashem, have been really privileged to be involved in teaching in many of the seminaries and teaching women for a good number of years. And I have to say that some of my most aha moments in preparation for teaching, and I'm the first to admit that I teach, because that's what really keeps me on a schedule and on a deadline in opening up the books. Some of my most aha moments have come from looking down at the footnotes, because that's when the fun really starts. There's no question that you could learn a Sicha and you'll get a tremendous amount out of it. But then if you revisit the Sicha, maybe on the second round, or maybe the Sicha following week, or maybe one page of one Sicha of 1 week, where you challenge yourself to look down in the footnotes, and then the footnotes send you to a Mishnah, and you open up that Mishnah, and you go back and you try to figure out why was it critical that the Rebbe bring this in. And that is like a treasure hunt. Looking down at the footnotes is giving yourself like a key to a treasure hunt, right? And I'll share that I remember this Simchas Torah, I'm not sure how, but somehow miraculously, I had a few quiet minutes, and my mother-in-law had suggested a particular Sicha for something that I was teaching. Now, I couldn't remember exactly which Chelek it was, and I couldn't remember exactly which Sicha it was, so I opened up a Sicha, and I tried looking for something on that particular subject, and I found the Sicha that looked very interesting, so I stopped and I looked at it. And then something was bothering me about, didn't quite, I couldn't quite find the transition. So I looked down at the footnote, and the footnote led me to one place, and that place led me to another. And I had the luxury, and it was some Torah, so I guess I had the extra motivation, and I followed that treasure hunt. And I have to say that what I discovered in that treasure hunt has so influenced every class that I teach in Taras HaMishpacha. So go figure that out. We never know where this hunt is going to take us. And that's really what I want to challenge us, is to not only, sign up for the project, and not to say that that's not incredible. Any woman, anybody who has signed up and who's able to, in some form or another, even if it means reading the Dvar Torah version, prior to Shabbos, deserves a tremendous Yashar Kayach. But it's time to move it on. And that's really what I just want to challenge us. To the Eibishter, it was critical that we be physically present. He needed us there, And so the gift that we could really give ourselves is just like, when you start an exercise class and you're no longer feeling Charlie horse in your muscles, it's good. It's definitely good to still show up, but you could get more out of it, So I really want to encourage all of us that maybe in the following Chelek, we stretch our ruchnistic muscles, and however we've been learning till now, we give ourselves the gift of this treasure hunt. And really we know, as women gifted with this feminine neshama, we know in every relationship, the more we give, the more we're going to get. So ultimately, and as the Ikaris Abayis, if we're giving and we're getting our circle of influence, especially when the Ikaris Abayis has taken on monumental stature the last few weeks, months, so the influence that we have by being further invested and further excited and even more passionate about what it is that this gift that the Rebbe gave us in the form of Likkutei Sichos is something that every single one of us can benefit from. And I just want to add two short thoughts. Here in Eretz Yisrael, we're actually in Bahal Loischa, okay, which challenges the project Likkutei Sichos, and God bless them. They were on that challenge. This morning when I logged in, they were all set for those of us that did not have two Yom Tif and did read Parshas Nasai. And so now we're on to Balois Chan. And I just want to, and a quote that I'm sure we're all aware of the idea, you know, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells Aaron Balois Chan Haneros, it wasn't just hit and run. You know, you can't just, you know, bring the flame and move on. You have to make sure that the flame has been nurtured with a fire so it could stand on its own. And I think that by taking our learning one step further, it's that idea of the Balois Chan Haneros, you know, the more we, and it's not always so simple. And I recognize that, you know, and it takes a little bit more time, but the effect of it, the warmth and the geschmack and the koch that we will have by spending a few more minutes lighting that candle, i.e. our neshama, or whatever element of ruchnius that we're into at that moment through our learning, the long-term effect is one that will stand and keep us for all that much longer. And I just want to conclude with the words that are always used when you make a siyum, the idea of hadron alech, you know, hadron alech mesechtes, or whatever it is that we're learning, but that the terminology, the translation of the word hadron alech means we shall return to you. And there's something very, very, empowering is too cheap of a word. There's something so gratifying and so, like, I don't know, it's hard to even put into terms. To look at a screen, we're onto 4 screens, and to say those terms, Hadron Alech, and know that together with other Jewish women, we're going to return not only to these sichas, but we're going to take our journey one step further and one step further. And Amir Hashem, through that kaichas that we as women can give to one another, specifically when we're kaching in the Rebbe's sichas, is just incredibly unparalleled. So Ishakayach again, Leah, to you. And believe me, we all know that if your husband's working hard, then there's keeping the fort down, okay? But I have the opportunity to see shluchim here visiting in Eretz Yisrael, I ask them how their wives are doing. If they're here, somebody's working very hard. So for every email and every logistics and every nonstop that your husband is doing, somebody's working very hard. So Ishakayach, Leah, to you.
You're welcome. And thank you, Rivky, for your words. And I think that it's a very good way to end. And I'm going to be thinking about that, exercising the spiritual muscles. And I have to say, I think I needed to hear that yesterday towards the end of Shabbos, after 2 days Yom Tif. I was finishing the Likkutei, and I'm the type of person, I will admit, I always, like when I looked for a sicha to learn, I went for the Avaida Dik. I skipped over. It was, you know, a very intricate, nuanced, halachic, I just passed over. And I actually started on the nitty-gritty of the Likkutei, and then I said, I don't have a head for this. And I just like flipped the pages, and I went to the Yeina Shel Torah at the end. And then I said, no, like I have to go back. Like I can do this. And I went back, and so I think that all of us, sometimes we need that push, and let's keep that in mind to, you know, exercise our spiritual muscles and grow. And Amir Hashem, next Chelek that we finish, I think we'll all have reached new levels. So I'll unmute everyone. If anyone wants to ask questions, women who teach, or comment, share your comments before we go.
Hi.
Oops, I was on mute. Okay, thank you, everybody. And Amir Hashem, we will have our next Siyum with Mashiach.
Thank you, Leah. That was absolutely beautiful.
And everyone is unmuted. If you want to comment, if you'd like a chavrusa, then I know somebody mentioned about looking for a chavrusa, so you can comment here or in the